meet my bride. Let's go for a ride in my newfangled automobile. Just where we will go, nobody knows, but it's sure a great way to feel. Behind the wheel of the speed meter steel, it's my newfangled automobile.
Hello and welcome to Vintage Car History. I'm Wild Bill. It is true that the car as we know it was first invented in Germany during the 1880s. In the following decade, France led the way with innovations in design. Yet the cars of the 19th century are quite often hard to even recognize as cars. A modern car has four wheels with pneumatic tires, a steering wheel, a honeycomb radiator in the front, and bodywork that includes doors and a windshield. A modern car rides low to the ground for good center of gravity and balances the weight of the car between the axles. Modern cars all have these features, but who was the first to design and build what is arguably the first truly modern car? To answer that question, we must return to Germany and to the workshop of Wilhelm Maybach. He was born in the small town of Heilbronn, which is located in southwestern Germany, in 1846. His father was a master at joinery and was fairly successful as a maker of cabinets and furniture. His mother passed away when he was 7, and his father moved with his 5 young sons to Stuttgart, where there was some extended family that could help him out. Unfortunately, he also died a few years later, and young Wilhelm was orphaned at age 10. The plight of the 5 brothers reached the press, and young Wilhelm was graced with a benefactor. The Lutheran Church in Stuttgart sponsored a school for children in need, and the director of the school, Gustav Werner, took interest in young Wilhelm. He recognized the intuitive engineering skill in young Master Wilhelm and sponsored him to complete his education. Maybach would spend the next 5 years in the school's engineering workshop learning the basics of machinery and engines whilst also taking additional classes in both physics and mathematics. Maybach was an exceptional student and was noticed by quite a few people. One of those people was Gottlieb Daimler. By the age of 19, Wilhelm had his degree and was now working as a supervisor and instructor at the school. Daimler was, at the time, working with Nicholas Otto and looking for talent. He discovered Wilhelm Maybach, and the two men became instant friends, a friendship that would last for the rest of Daimler's life. The two men began to share ideas on engine design, and within a few years would work together to make industrial history. Maybach left the school and followed Daimler to work for a manufacturer of locomotives. The two of them spent their spare time talking about and designing engines of all sorts of specific industrial purposes. Out in Cologne, Nicholas Otto was working on stationary internal combustion engines, and both Daimler and Maybach joined him in 1872, with Maybach as their chief designer. Between the three of them, some 25 patents were created, including the patent for the 4-stroke engine. Unfortunately, Daimler and Otto had a falling out and parted ways in 1880. Maybach followed his friend Gottlieb, and together they founded their own company in Cannstatt, with Daimler as president and Maybach as chief engineer. The facility was actually an addition to Daimler's house, and his neighbors got suspicious with all the goings-on. Thinking they were running some sort of counterfeit money scheme, the neighbors called the police on them one day when they weren't there. But the police only found engines. But the incident inspired them to find a better facility, which they did in 1885. It was at about this time that Maybach's engine was first tried on a vehicle. It was a single-cylinder engine of about 1 horsepower, and Daimler fitted it to a bone shaker bicycle, thus creating the world's first motorcycle. It was not particularly fast or powerful, but the engine could run at about 700 RPM pretty much all day and proved a success. Later that year, Maybach's engine was patented and christened the Grandfather Clock engine by Daimler. It sported many innovations, including the first use of what could be called a carburetor. In 1894, Maybach would design and build what many considered to be the most influential engine of the vintage era, the Phoenix. This engine was absolutely revolutionary. 4-cylinder inline engine that could reach over 1,000 RPM and produce up to 10 horsepower. He improved the carburetor and created a cam system to operate the intake and exhaust valves. He invented the honeycomb radiator and used water to cool the engine, another first. This engine was a complete game changer in the automotive industry, and it sold like hotcakes. Indeed, it was at this time that the French automotive press began to refer to Maybach as the king of designers. Now, Maybach had been making cars with this engine, but the money behind the Daimler company that he worked for was lukewarm about cars at best, wanting to focus on stationary engines and the selling of engines as a component for other car makers. 2 major events happened in his life and career in 1900. His lifelong friend and mentor, Gottlieb Daimler, passed away, and with him the stability of the company. Yet at around the same time, a new force in his life would appear, Emil Jelinek. Jelinek was a minor Austrian nobleman that also raced cars and sold them through his dealership and noble connections. He greatly admired Maybach's work and made an agreement with him shortly before Daimler's death to design a new car for him to be unstoppable winner on the racetrack. And Maybach did just that. The prototype car was unveiled in 1901, and there was nothing like it on any road anywhere. Gone was the ponderous coachwork and big carriage wheels. The four-cylinder engine produced 35 horsepower, an unthinkable amount of power in a car of the day. Behind his patented radiator was a fan, powered by the engine through a belt that forced air through the radiator even if the car wasn't moving. The chassis itself was steel and low to the ground to avoid rolling the car in fast turns. A series of dampers cushioned the ride and gave for a better road feel. Maybach had designed the perfect car, to the praise of the press and the fear of all other racers in the Grand Prix circuit. Jelinek financed the production of this car, and in 1902, the old Daimler works were reorganized to focus on car production instead of just engines. At the insistence of Jelinek, the new firm was named Mercedes, after his 10-year-old daughter. Every car maker in the world that wanted to win races began to copy the design principles invented by Maybach and demonstrated in the Mercedes car. Principles that can be found on just about any car on the road to this day. Thanks for watching Vintage Car History, and we'll see you next week. Peace.